This is the Moonlight Graham Show, a freewheeling conversation with the role players, the underdogs, and guys with flat-out great stories in sports.
Hello and welcome back to the Moonlight Graham Show, where we celebrate the role players, the underdogs, and the great stories in sports. And unfortunately, we're not talking about any of those things today, because today I want to talk about the gambling scandal that's happening here in the state of Iowa right now, mostly with the college football teams here in Iowa, the Iowa State football teams, but also athletes across a lot of different sports at the major universities here in Iowa. And it's frankly one of the biggest scandals I can ever remember in my lifetime. And it's kind of weird because we're almost like a month into the scandal. I mean, frankly, we've been hearing about this. We've been hearing whispers about this for a long time now. I think the first time I heard about this was maybe 6 months ago. Just people in the office talking that have connections to the different athletic departments saying that this was coming. And I think a lot of folks have known this was coming for quite a while now. But it's so bizarre because as we're entering into football season here, you can see how even though both teams are going to lose a handful to, 5 to 10 players, we're going to stop talking about this here in a very short manner of time. And at the same time, I can't think of a worse scandal for an athlete to be involved in. I mean, obviously there's like criminal offenses that are going to be much worse than betting on games. But as far as sports go, this is as bad as it gets. And most of the folks that listen to this podcast, are of my age or older, even folks in their 20s, about Pete Rose, about the Black Sox, right? And the Black Sox are so closely tied to the Field of Dreams as well. Those are examples of guys that have bet on baseball in particular, and then were banned from life from the sport. And frankly, it's my opinion, and I did a paper on Shoeless Joe Jackson in college, and my point of that paper was how Shoeless Joe never actually bet on baseball. And I believe that. I don't think he actually ever bet, but being that he was involved with that group and he was kind of close enough to it, you can kind of understand the justification for his lifetime ban of baseball. Pete Rose, on the other hand, he bet on baseball. He bet on games that he had inside knowledge on. He bet on games that he was managing. He bet on games he was playing in. So a lifetime ban is warranted for Pete Rose. I'm one of those guys, I might be in the minority, but Pete Rose deserved his lifetime ban from baseball. Now, I also believe that it's a kind of a dual conversation there, because I don't believe that the Hall of Fame necessarily has to recognize baseball's lifetime ban, because the Hall of Fame and Major League Baseball are not are not the same thing. They're two different entities. So Pete Rose probably should be in the Hall of Fame, but I'm glad that he's been banned from baseball for life, because anyone that bets on sports when they're in that sport should be banned from life for that sport. There's literally nothing worse that you can do. Like, just think about it. If you're betting in any form, even in a league that you are involved in, you've got inside knowledge. You know other people on other teams. You have insider information. It's like insider trading, right? Why Martha Stewart spent time in prison. Same concept here within sports. Even if you're not playing in that game and you're just on the team, on the bench, any influence that you could have over that team could drastically sway an outcome of a game, especially in highly competitive sports. Even if you know other people on other teams, you could have an impact on that through insider information, through information that you share with other folks in the game, in the industry, in the league. And so sports could never come anywhere near that. And they got to have hard lines when it comes to it. And so for this specific scandal here, like, I've listened to some people talk about it and they're saying like, well, it's only $5 bets. It's only $10 bets. It was the backup kicker. It was this guy who was injured, didn't even play. Like it's not that big of a deal, but it doesn't get, in my opinion, to be any of a bigger deal than this. And so I am fully supportive, frankly, of these kids losing their NCAA privileges for life. They should never have any NCAA eligibility. Frankly, I think it's a bad look for even the NAIA schools to be picking up these athletes then after they've been cut by NCAA programs and then allowing them to play. I think that's a bad look on the NAIA. Like, do you have no rules, no standards? How are you taking guys that have gambled on sports and now you're letting them play? What's the difference here? So I think that once you gamble on sports, you lose your privilege to play college sports. Now, you can play sports the rest of your life, but I think that you should be playing rec sports for the rest of your life. You no longer should have the opportunity to play professionally in any legitimate professional league, and you no longer should have the ability to play in any NCAA college-sanctioned sport. I think it's that egregious of an error. And I know these we're calling them kids, right? They're adults. They're adults, right? They're 18 to 22 years old. They know better than this. I have not been an athlete or a college athlete in 15, 16 years at this point. And when I was an athlete, you couldn't bet on sports just by having the app on the phone. You couldn't even drive to the local casino and bet on sports because you literally had to go to like Atlantic City or Las Vegas to make these bets. But at the same time, even as hard as it was to bet on sports back then, we knew that you could not bet on sports. You could not do an NCAA pool where you put money in. You could not do any of these things. And we had an hour-long session on that. It was probably 2-hour-long session on it 16 years ago. Fast forward to 2021, when all of a sudden all these gambling apps come out. I got to imagine that the compliance departments of every athletic department across the country, they were coming in and doing half-day seminars, full-day seminars, making it really, really clear of what you can and what you cannot do. These athletes knew. They're not just kids. And so they knew they made an egregious error and they need to be penalized for it. That's just the reality of it. That's my opinion. But if you don't go hard on this, then how can we trust that the legitimacy of any sport that we're watching? So I don't really feel bad for the kids. I have compassion for them. I guess, let me rephrase that. I do feel bad for them because they made an obvious error. It's a really bad error. Their reputation is going to be hurt by this error for a long, long time because when you're a college athlete, especially a Division I athlete, and you make an error like this, you will become notorious for it. So I feel bad for them for that. But I don't feel bad for them that they're losing their eligibility. They deserve that. The punishment fits the crime. Now, the kind of the next step of this is, where is the leadership in this? So if you've got dozens of athletes at major universities, and I know we're talking about Iowa and Iowa State here, but let's not be naive. If every state started investigating this, the same type of stuff is probably going to be popping up all over the country. And there's probably a reason for it that other states are not looking into it because they don't want to have the scandal pop up in their state as well. But how, like the amount of suspensions we've seen through the years for like lack of institutional control. Can you describe any better example of lack of institutional control than what we're seeing right now at Iowa State? I mean, where's Matt Campbell? Where's Kirk Ferentz? Where's Jamie Pollard? Where is Iowa's AD? Is it Barta? Where are these guys? And I'm not trying to place all the blame on them because I do believe, most of the blame goes with the athletes that are the ones making the decisions. And I'm not calling for the heads of like the coaches or the ADs, but how is none of this coming back on these guys? Like, how did they not make it so clear that, hey, we are going to make the downside of this sound so bad that you're never even going to come close to gambling? And we're talking about the starting quarterback at Iowa State was gambling on football games. This is insane. This is insane. How is the coach not somewhat responsible for this? How is the athletic director not somewhat responsible for this? Same thing at Iowa. Like, you had the backup kicker. I'm like, it's not that crazy of a scenario for like a kicker to get hurt, and then this guy who's betting on games to come in and have a game-winning kick when he's placed a bet on that game. Like, Arlen Bruce was a starting wide receiver for the Hawkeyes and was betting on games. This is insane. This is one of the biggest sports scandals in sports history. And we're going to be kind of forgetting about it. We're going to be past it in like 3-4 weeks. And I just think it's insane. And I do think that oftentimes with scandal, we want a bad guy. You know, we want either somebody that we want to tear down, or we want therefore to be somebody on the other side of this that is so bad, that is so evil, that it's really easy for us to jump on it. That's the storyline that we want. In this case, like, the bad guy on the other side of it is human nature, because gambling is a vice just like any other vice, just like drinking, just like drugs, just like pornography. Like, these are human just vices. This is human nature. And so that's where I struggle with gambling all the time, is that we have become so accustomed to everybody just being cool with gambling. Like, oh, it's on our phone. It's in front of our faces all the time. Everybody we know bets. So it's not that big a deal. It's just small amounts of money. Like, this is how it goes. You start gambling small amounts. You start gambling once a week. And then a couple of years down the road, you're either continuing to bet small amounts, but just on a lot of games, or you're betting large amounts. This is how people get caught up in the dangers of gambling. It's a drug, it's a vice, and it's very dangerous. And so that's why, like, and I'm not saying like I'm all high and mighty here. Like, I'll bet on a game every now and again. But I'm also very aware that, man, I can see how dangerous this can be. I can see how I could become obsessed with this. And I think it's dangerous for everybody to just be cool with gambling. I think it's dangerous for every podcast you listen to is brought to you by DraftKings or brought to you by whatever the gambling thing is. And same thing with like TV shows and ESPN and all of these folks that are just fully in bed with gambling. Like, be careful, be very careful, and be leery of this stuff, because it can be very dangerous for not only us as individuals, but our sports that we hold dear. So be careful with gambling is kind of the thing I've been saying for a long time here on this podcast. I think this is another good example of it. And I'm going to come out the fans here too, because one thing that's always bugged me, like a pet peeve of mine, is when you talk to people that gamble on sports, oftentimes they'll say things like, I've got to bet on games to make it interesting. Like, it's hard for me to watch a game if I've got nothing on the line. My pushback on this is like, man, you're not a sports fan. If you don't love sports enough to just watch, to be entertained, to enjoy the game, you're a gambling addict. You're not a sports fan. You're a gambling addict. If you can't be entertained or enjoy a game and you have to bet on it to be interested in it, then you're just addicted to gambling. You don't love sports. It's just something to gamble on. And if you are watching games because you got money on the game and that's the only reason why you're watching, then what are you doing with your life? Like, why are you watching? Why are you betting on sports? There are many other things that you can do with your life rather than gamble on a game and then go watch that game for 3 hours. If you don't really care about the game, don't bet on it. Don't watch it. Do something else. So this whole scandal, it kind of drives me nuts. I'm kind of off sports talk radio right now. Haven't been listening to as many podcasts because I got kids at home and all this. And I'm not trying to be all high and mighty or like holier than thou here. I hope that's not the message that I'm getting across. I just think that this is a massive scandal that for as little as I'm listening to stuff, it feels like we're not talking about it enough, because we still want our college football, right? And as fans, as everybody that's involved, it's like, oh, I hope it doesn't take away our college football season. I hope we still have Iowa State football games. I hope we still have Iowa football games. And to me, this is like the worst thing that I've ever seen from a kind of organized gambling scandal. And so, these kids, I know it's tough, but they deserve what they're getting. I hope they all lose their eligibility if they bet on sports. I think I want to hear more from Campbell. I want to hear more from Pollard. I want to hear more from Ferentz, because this stuff, if they're not in charge of their program, is that a bigger issue? Like, how deep does this rabbit hole go? Are there more issues that are going to be coming out? And frankly, I'm really curious to see what this looks like across the nation right now. How many kids are betting on sports, and how much we can really trust the games that we're watching. Anyway, that's my rant on gambling. That's my rant on for this week. We'll be back with another podcast episode. We got a couple of great Moonlighters coming up. I'm not going to spoil it, but make sure to tune in over the next couple of weeks for some awesome Moonlighters. And have a great week, guys.
It's Moonlight Graham, yeah. It's a pretty good program, broadcasting to the heartland. Sports stories for the everyman. It's Moonlight Graham, yeah. Please follow us on Instagram. You're loving us on Twitter too. You download every pod we do. It's Moonlight Graham.